Everybody, I'm Sarah. I'm one of the trainers at the centre. We've got quite a few people that are still coming along today, so I know there's been a bit of traffic. So a huge thank you for those of you that made it. So I know you've come from all different places. Just before we begin, a show of hands of how many of you have actually done some NLP before. Who's actually done some? Okay, so only two of you, so three. The rest of you are all completely new to NLP. Okay. So we've got Jimmy Petruzzi, who will let introduce himself. He's going to be taking you through the seminar this afternoon. So before we begin, any questions whatsoever about NLP or anything like that? I know that I've been in touch with probably most of you. I've been the contact through the emails. So any questions, anything so far? No? Just all raring to go. Okay, I'll let Jimmy introduce himself.
Okay, so welcome everybody. So we're going to be doing a seminar this evening called Creating a Winning Formula for Success. It uses a lot of NLP skills. A lot of NLP is integrated into this process, but also other aspects of psychology, things like CBT and psychology conventional as well. So we take the best bits out of everywhere to help people move forward. It's a good, powerful seminar. It's got some really good techniques that you'll take certain things away. If you take one thing away from this evening, it makes a difference, then this job done really, and that's key. And the amount of people who email back after we've done a best practice group or seminar and say, okay, I took this thing away and it really worked well for me, is you know, amazing how you can take one bit of information and put it into effect, and then you're on the way. Okay, so creating a winning formula for success. My background, I work with a variety of different people. I do a lot of work with offenders. I help them to re-engage back into education and help them with their thought process. I also do a lot of work in sport as well, and I work in business too, and we run the courses. So I think what's unique about us as an organisation is we do the work every day anyway, so we experience these things all the time, which is powerful. And I guess, you know, I could stand here and tell you that it always goes to plan and everything always goes well. It doesn't. There are times when it can be very challenging, but if you stick with it and you focus on the outcome, then sure, often enough, you know, you get there. But throughout the seminar, we'll look at certain things that you can integrate in your own business or life or whatever to just get that little bit of an extra edge. Okay, so the first thing that we do in the winning formula is, and I've just got some guidance sheets there for you to use, is take responsibility. Okay, in NLP we've got cause and effect. Okay, has anyone ever come across cause and effect? The term cause and effect? Okay, so we can't deal the cards we're dealt with. We've got no responsibility, but we can respond in the way we want to. Okay, some people live at cause and some people live at effect. Some of us a bit of both really. The more powerful process is to be at effect. And when we're at effect, we're affecting things. We're taking responsibility for our own lives and doing what we can. Now, in a lot of the sessions I run individually, a lot of people come along and say, okay, what exactly do you want? What can I do for you? And they will tell me for 10, 15, 20 minutes, for as long as I let them, the things that they don't want. I don't want to be unhappy anymore. I don't want this. I don't want that. Yet, at no point do they tell me what they want, or do they know what they want? When I put the question, what exactly do you want? Well, I don't really know. I just want to be happy. And sure enough, everybody's happy at some point during the day, one would think. So, you know, it's about having an idea in terms of what we want to do. So the key is really, and the difference between being at cause and effect, when we're at cause, okay, we live our lives based on situations that aren't controllable. We react to situations that aren't really controllable to us, okay? So, you know, it might be that you're in a situation where you go to a job interview and you don't get the job for one reason or the other, and you don't bother going to the one next week or the one the week after because that hasn't worked out, and your mindset is stuck there. When you're at effect, then you might see it a little bit differently. You might be a little bit disappointed, yet you'll look to learn from that experience, so then you can improve the next time, and you look at things and you reflect on things and you move forward. So the difference between doing the two different areas, and one of the key aspects of having a winning formula is taking responsibility for our own actions, which is key. And the first thing a lot of people will say when I deliver an NLP training, You know, how, well, they knew someone or something may have happened to them, walk across the road and got hit by a car, whatever. How do you legislate for that? Well, things happen. Things happen beyond our control. They'll happen to you, to me, to everybody out there. It's our response thereafter. And there's plenty of references out there, plenty of people out there that haven't had the best turn in life, but they've done something about it. You know, and I always look and read, and I'm always fascinated by people who've turned their life around. You know, read stories on people like Helen Keller, who was born deaf and blind, and managed to change the face of the world. And people who are able to do something with what they've got, the resources they've got. So if you were going to take either or, where do you think would be a better place to be? Do you think you'd be better off being a cause, so you just react to your circumstances and just plod along, or effect? If one thing doesn't work for you, you go off and do another, or at least give it a go, or you take the good from the bad. Where would you say would be a better place to be? Definitely, because you're looking for, even in difficult situations, in adversity, you're looking to draw strength from that. And one of the key things about the winning formula, in creating the winning formula, before we move on to some of the techniques, and I'm going to keep it as interactive as I can, because by keeping it interactive, you're going to take as much as you can in the time you've got in the seminar itself. So the key is really, it's taking responsibility for our own life, okay? And there's a lot of people that like to play the victim. It's always somebody else's fault other than themselves. And sometimes, no doubt, it is really, yeah, the key is for them to take responsibility, do what they can with the situation that they're in and with what they've got. And you'll find that there's always an excuse. Have you ever come across people who always have an excuse for not doing what they do? They didn't go to the best school. It was their parents' fault. It was the teacher's fault. It was everybody else's fault other than the person that they see in the mirror when they wake up in the morning, really. And that's the easy way out, really, isn't it? Short term. But long term, it's going to cause you a lot more problems than good, really, because we're always looking for an excuse for someone else to blame. Then we're never going to do anything to move forward. So the key part of the process is to take responsibility and, okay, draw from adversity. And also, if there is a situation that's not so good, look for the good in bad situations and see the glass half full rather than half empty. Okay. Realigning ourselves, and the realigning ourselves in terms of what we want for ourselves. Even we come across people who they have a goal, yeah, it's not really their goal. It might be their parents, what they want for them, or what they may have wanted for themselves but couldn't get there, or it might be what their social group thinks is the right thing to do. So making sure we do things that we want for ourselves, okay? Because some people like the idea of doing something. I'm sure you've come across people who like the idea of doing something. They like the idea of being a top sports person, or an actor, an actress, or a musician. They like the idea of the fame and fortune it's going to bring them. Really, yeah. They don't like the idea of having to get up in the morning and do some work to get to where they've got to get to, really. And that's the true test of someone who is driven enough to go for it. And one of the key processes of realigning ourselves is, first of all, understanding ourselves, our identity, and our values and beliefs. And we deal with these key areas. We deal with our identity and our purpose and our values and beliefs. And all of value is what's important to us. If we look at things on these levels here, it will tell us a lot about who we are and what direction to move in. If we don't like what we see here, then change it. Because you can change the environment you're in, you can change the capabilities, you can change a lot of things about yourself, yet it'll only be a short-term fix. It's at this area here that long-lasting change happens. And there's enough books out there and motivational speakers to make change, yet very small amount of people make change because they're not working at a much more significant level. I'm sure we've all come across people who move to a different area, a different country even, and then they end up coming back, or they're as miserable there as they are wherever else they were. Or the other people who go out there and buy a new car and new clothes and everything else, they might be okay for a week or two, but then they're back to where they were before. Okay, or they might learn some new behavioural patterns and they change, but yet they're back again because the true essence of who they are and where they're going goes back to square one again. So what we'll do, and there is some pens there for you if you wish to take part in the exercise. I want you to write down in your own mind what your purpose is, what you feel your purpose is, and who you would say you are. Okay?
Let's put the pen on it.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Please. Anybody else need a pen?
Deborah, I love another one.
Okay, so what you would say your purpose is, who you are, your identity, what's important to you, your belief about yourself, and your identity and purpose. So we're looking at what you feel your purpose is on this planet, who you say you are, what's important to you, what your beliefs about yourself in regards to your identity and purpose is. They are some pretty thought-provoking questions, and having worked with a number of people across a broad range of areas, the first time that I ask these questions, I do, especially one-to-one coaches, a lot of people are stumped. They don't know. And even 1, 2, 3, 6 weeks later, they still don't know what they think their purpose is. They still don't know who they actually are. And they just live their lives in that mindset, really. And if you don't know who you are, what purpose you are, then how are we ever going to get aligned to do anything, really? We're just going to pretty much drift along really, and it's not really a good place to be, because if we're drifting along, we're going to set ourselves up for a really big fall at some point. And I think the thing is, really, we understand what's important to us, and we can line that up pretty much like a compass in terms of knowing where we want to go, then we've got a pretty powerful process of getting to where we want to get to, and living our lives in terms of the way we feel we're getting as much as we possibly can from life, which is key.
Just could I ask you a question there, Jimmy, on that? Just clarify something. When you're saying "who am I," when you say what I believe I am, or what I believe other people see me as, what? Just clarify that for me.
Mm-hmm. So where the identity is, who
Right.
With the belief.
Okay, with the belief.
Yeah.
Okay. Our belief in terms of our identity and our purpose. Do we believe it's serving us? Do we believe it's congruent to us as a person, to where we want to go? Do we actually believe that, or have we just accepted that? Or is it somebody else's belief? So, for example, how many people have you come across that have an identity which is based on who they are at work, okay, or based on who they perceive themselves in an environment where they live, or in a proximity, yet really in their own mind, do they believe that that's congruent to who they are? Okay, is that actually them, or are they just picking up an identity and holding on to that to to keep themselves safe, whether it be a comfort zone or whether it be an identity that they feel comfortable enough to hide behind, really. So I guess the answer to the question is how what belief do we have about ourselves at that level there, about our identity and our purpose, really. Do we believe it fits in with us? Do we believe it's aligned with where we are and where we want to go? Is that...
Well, I mean, for clarification, I'd have said I'd ask you, who are you? Who do you see yourself as? And then that possibly...
Sure. Well, I see myself as a different person to different people.
Right.
I see myself as being myself, as an individual, yet to different people in different situations. I see myself as a different, not necessarily a different person, yet a different set of behavioural capabilities that I draw on in different situations. So if I'm working with, say, the offenders, and I see myself as someone who's there to change an aspect of society, rather than knowing about it on the radio about crime and people I see myself as affecting that and doing something about that to make that change. If I can change one person, then it may have a knock-on effect. That one person might not break into someone's house, and by not breaking into someone's house, that one person might go on and educate themselves and get a job. If I'm working with sports people, I see myself as someone who can help them to realise their dream, and business as well. If I'm with family, then I feel a responsibility to give them everything I've got and take that identity away, because I wouldn't want to be the same person as I am when I'm working and focused with family and different people as well. And I think we see that a lot. We see people, people coming home and taking their work identity into their family environment. You see, lawyers go home and cross-examine the whole family, basically, or GP coming home and diagnosing everybody. Well, I think for us, and the key is really our belief about ourselves. Okay, so we believe we are just one thing, or if we believe our purpose is on one level, then it's going to affect what we do. It's going to affect how we conduct ourselves and behaviourally, and it's at that level there, because you can teach someone a lot of behavioural patterns, and there's plenty of things out there, plenty of books you can read for techniques, but will they carry on doing that if they feel that doesn't fit with themselves? So, sort of explain it a little.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. I think this area here became apparent to me because where it really became apparent to me about realignment and living our own life the way we feel fit in with ourselves was I've worked in football for various teams for a long while, and I was working in an industry, and I sort of quickly became, I love the game, I love sport, and I always have and always will do, yet I became a little bit disillusioned as things were being run, and I'm in this environment, literally, to use a metaphor of, so several shark-infested waters, really, because there's a lot of, finance moving about in very small minorities, and there was a lot of people who wanted to get into the game. And I thought, well, why do they want to get into the game for? Do they love the game? Do they love the sport? And really, we went through a generation where, being a footballer came with an identity of having a fast car, a house, and, a model girlfriend, whatever came with it, but really, nothing was further than the truth for probably 99% of the people who played the game anyway. Yet people became transfixed by what they felt they would become if they got there. Yet the only thing they didn't realise they had to do to get there was on the belief level, work very hard. They thought it was just about turning up. And I guess we sort of see that in other areas as well. In a lot of programs we've got these days, summer programs, where it's all, tends to be pretty quick fix and there's no real purpose. And I think that's probably why a lot of people tend to come and go. And I think in that industry I began to realise that, there was kids as young as 9, 10 years of age that were being, brought into this environment that they didn't necessarily, they just wanted to play, enjoy themselves really. And if they kept that enjoyment throughout their career, then they had a better chance of getting through. Yet, I think the key was really, all that enjoyment was being knocked out of them really. And I think if you took some of the best players in the world, even regardless of what they're earning, they'd be back playing Sunday league. And I think that's the key. So people like the idea of doing things, yeah, the actual doing is a different thing as well, really, which is key. So I think in NLP we've got a very powerful process called logical levels, which is really powerful. And whenever we run on the course, a lot of people have a lot of big realizations as to where they are, where their goals are, where their life is going as well. And I'll modify that in tonight's seminar. Obviously we're only here for a short duration, but I think there's some pretty powerful thought-provoking questions. And I think the key is once we've got that alignment and we know what we are, you've probably heard it over and over again, setting goals. And one of the ways and best ways I find to set goals is by profiling our life. Okay, and I learned this in working with high performance athletes and sports people. What we would do, we'd profile their ability, we'd profile their technique, their tactical awareness, their speed, every component of the game. I'd strip it down and say, okay, this is every area of the game. Where would you say out of 10, between 1 being low and 10 being high? Give yourself a grade. And I'd get them to reflect on their ability and think, well, how can you take it to a new level? So I took that process across to life. I thought, well, if it works really well with some really elite performers who are going away and breaking records and doing all sorts of things, really, I thought, well, can we not take it to life, really, and use it in a way that we can move forward? And by profiling key areas of their life, and for example, we've got work, we've got relationships, we've got balance in life, we've got our health as well, obviously, which is really important. So the things that we value the most in our life, we at times probably don't spend as much time we should in those areas. And the thing is, if we've got these goals, whenever I get people who come across to me who say, well, we do set goals, but we never seem to get anywhere nearer to the goal, the first thing I say, well, how much time are you spending on realising it? Well, very minimal time, you're not going to get there. You need to ensure that your weekly plan consists of a strategy to get you to where you want to get to. And I think that the key is, and the power of profiling a goal, is if you were to have business goals and you spend every hour God sent going for those business goals, what's going to happen to your life balance, your health and your relationships if you're not spending any time in those areas? And any ideas that you think what might happen to these areas of your life you're not putting any time into it? Exactly. So the key is deciding where we want to be, but planning towards getting there. And if we spend too much time on this side of things, relationship, then these are gonna, or too much on this side of things. So it's getting a balance. It's working out, we said before, what's important to you, your key 5 or 6 values, what you feel your identity is, who you feel you are as a person, and then if we're going to set some goals, setting goals in key areas of your life. And the best way to set goals in key areas of life is to decide where you are, where you want to be in, say, 5, 10 years' time, yet where you feel you are now on a scale of 1 to 10. It's always a really powerful process to put in place because you begin to work towards where you want to get to. And I think the biggest thing that people do who don't achieve their goals, I feel, in life, in sport or business, is they try and do everything overnight, 30 days, 1 year, and they overestimate what they can do in a very short space of time, but they underestimate if they just lengthen the process to a 4-year, 8-year cycle, they might just get there. And you'll see different people have different strategies. You see the person who's planned, who's got a long-term plan, they know exactly where they want to be, they know exactly where they are, then what they do, they're able to take the right steps to get them to where they want to go. And that's key, that's paramount. That's not to say you're not going to have problems along the way, because the minute you start a goal, it doesn't take too long before you go for that goal where something comes along and gets in the way. Yet, if we know where we're going, then we can always focus on the solution, which is key. If we focus on the solution more than we focus on the problem, we've got a better chance of overcoming it. So what I'll do as an exercise, I want you to choose one area of your life where you have got a goal. If you haven't got a goal, then decide on a goal. You're not accountable to have to go for it. You know, it's just there for you, but you can if you wish. And I want you to give yourself a score from 1 to 10 in terms of where you are in proportion to where you want to be. And it could be anything really. any one of these areas, and any one of these areas could, you know, quantify as being maybe writing a book, or maybe setting up a business, or maybe traveling the world. Any area really that you feel would be significant to you in terms of your own human needs, and decide where you are on a scale of 1 to 10 towards getting there. Then having decided this is where you are on a scale of 1 to 10, the next phase is to work out how to get closer to realising that. And of course, when you realise that goal, then what you will do is reevaluate that and then go again. And I think the most powerful part of a goal setting process, and I think those of you who set goals in the past, isn't necessarily achieving it, it's that destination, getting there, the journey. Because sometimes you get there and you think, is that all it is? And a lot of people have that. And the destination is towards achieving that goal is equally as compelling as getting there. Then we get there, we evaluate, and we go again. It's amazing how when we know where we want to go, how powerful the process is. So if you do that, I mean, you can do that by all means for as many areas as you want and set as many goals as you want. Yet if we at least can do one, the next process we're going to move towards getting higher on that level between 1 and 10 towards realising. So you could be at a 3 or a 5 or a 7 or whatever in terms of doing that. And it's not easy to quantify things psychologically, because it's not like running a race where you can time 100 metres. Here, it's a little bit different. Yet, we have to quantify it in some sort of way. If we don't quantify it, then we may as well be aiming in the dark. And once we quantify where we are, the key is, if you're going to realise a goal, okay, if you had a goal to run a marathon, write a book, or to travel or whatever, who would you speak to? Would you speak to who's already done that? Someone who's already done that? Would you speak to someone who's never done it before? Of course you would, definitely, because you've got a better chance of achieving it. And one of the beauties and the most powerful parts of NLP, at the very heart of NLP, is modelling excellence. So all those years ago when Bandler and Grinder, the founders of NLP, or who were very predominant in putting NLP together in the late 70s, what they did, they wanted to know why some people do well and some wouldn't do so well. And they studied people closely. They studied 3 of the best therapists of their generation, Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir, and Fritz Perls. And they also studied a lot of individuals along the way to find out, well, what were they doing differently? If someone had a phobia and overcame the phobia, what were they doing differently to someone who didn't do? And they would elicit those strategies, mental strategies, and they thought, was it possible, and an NLP presupposition is, it's possible one person to do something, it's possible someone else. Just a question of how. And that was the key really for them in terms of developing it. It started as a therapeutic based to begin with, but through time it's moved on into business and sport and every other area as well. And the key is, so we know where to get to, and we decide, having been very clear and having a very powerful clarity about getting there, then we can sort of think, okay, who actually is where we want to be, and what can we learn from them to get there? Because a lot of people who've got goals, what they tend to do is ask the wrong people. And the wrong people generally don't encourage people to do anything. If someone's not done something before, then they tend to be a little bit skeptical about anyone else doing it. And for whatever reason, I don't know. It could be that they mean well, yet in that process of meaning well, maybe they might be just looking to pull the person back in to fit in with their own identity. Okay, and a perfect and classic example was, have you ever read anyone ever read the Salt and Sugar autobiography? Anyone ever read the Salt and Sugar?
Alan Sugar.
Yeah, you read that book. And he says in the book, these are in my words, not his, but I believe he mentions in the book at one point that his parents told him to stay in his job. He had a job with the public sector, and if he had a job with the public sector, it was a job for life, but he said, no, I want to sell whatever he wanted to sell from the back of his van. I said, no, you're making the biggest mistake. He said, no, I'll do that. So they didn't mean him any harm by saying that, but they were acting out of their frame of reference, what they thought was right. Had he did what they told him to do, then he probably wouldn't be where he is today. So I guess he was fortunate to have the foresight to think, no, I can do it. But not everyone's got the foresight to do that. Some people won't break out of that comfort zone. And it's not necessarily because people don't mean well for them. There are people out there, when you have a goal, who definitely, don't want other people to achieve it because they can't do it themselves or feel that they can't do it themselves. But there are also people who do mean well, yet sometimes they're probably not the best people to ask as well. And I see that through a lot of the work I do, and when I get people coming to me with various issues like addictions and depression and anxiety, and the first thing I'll ask is, what have you done so far to overcome the problem? Well, it's either counselling, which serves a purpose to a point, yet if you're running over these problems all the time, you're hardly going to make any effort towards overcoming that. They might join groups. So they join a group, like an Alcohol Anonymous group, and then with other people who've got the same problem, and rather than looking to go forward and breaking the cycle, they're comparing problems. And 5, 10, 15 years later, they're still in the same situation. They're drawing comfort. They're healed at the wound, really. And there's got to be a point, if you're serious about moving forward, then you have to start thinking, okay, where do I want to be? How am I going to get there? Okay, which is key. And I've seen a lot of people who haven't necessarily had the best education. They're not the most articulate people. They're not the most talented people. They haven't been to the best schools. They've had disadvantages and many knocks along the way, yet they want to get there badly enough. They'll keep working at it, they'll keep chipping away, and they generally do get at some point there. So setting goals is a powerful thing, and if you just bear in mind the goal that you set there, the belief, okay? What do we know about belief? Well, if you believe in something, then you're halfway there to truth and reality. So what we believe to be true is generally true, okay? If we go back to the realigning ourselves we mentioned earlier, what we believe to be true at that level there, and if you remember what I asked you, what you believe to be true about your identity and your purpose at that point there, well, whatever you answer there holds truth, okay? And that's the key. One of the analogies I use in the courses I run is when you sort of, if you're mindful and just take note of people when you watch TV and see interviews and read biographies, you'll see people give away certain beliefs about themselves, okay? And that belief becomes apparent in their path to getting to where they got there. So we mentioned the salt and sugar. At some point, he must have had a belief that he could go on and do what he did, or he wouldn't have got there. A number of people as well. Have anyone ever seen the J.K. Rowling story or read about it or seen it? So she believes she could get a publisher and release this book. Several publishers that she sent the book to believed otherwise, said, no, you're not going to do it. Yet she just kept going, she kept going, she kept going, and eventually she broke through. And they turned it into a film, and the rest is history, as they say. So there has to be a belief at some point, at some level, she can do what she's going to do, really. So belief is not always easy, because if you haven't done something before, it's not easy to believe at times, because we haven't got those references and background, okay? Yet in saying that, a classic quote was, has anyone ever heard of the Dr. Roger Bannister, the 4-minute mile? Okay, he was the first person that broke that 4-minute mile. Scientists would say. Scientists said if you run in the 4 minutes, you would die. It wasn't possible to run in the 4 minutes a mile. Okay, when he broke that 4-minute barrier, he said he figured he was dead because he wasn't meant to do that. And these are scientists saying that. These are people who have gone to universities for several years, who are very academically qualified, yet they're saying that. And I think that the key is really, where belief is concerned, who knows what's possible? Who sets the agenda? You know, who knows? Nobody's got a divine right on anything. And, you know, people can really be affected by the beliefs. You know, and the amount of people I speak to who, as a result of their beliefs, are affected in their life, how they see themselves. They see themselves in a negative way. They sabotage relationships. If they see themselves incapable of doing something, then they sabotage opportunity for work or opportunity for promotion. If they see themselves, even medically, situations, they go into a GP and they tell them they've got something or whatever, then they'll conform to that. They're told they're depressed, then they have that label then. Or they're told they've got a certain illness, and they sit with that label, which I'm not being dismissive, and I'm not qualified to talk about these things really. Yet in saying that, I've also seen people defy logic. Okay, I was talking to someone on the course actually on the weekend I ran, and she said that her grandmother was meant to have passed away, I think, 15, 20 years ago. So she was told. 15, 20 years later, she was still alive, and she set herself goals. Goals to see her grandkids, goals for her birthday, goals for whatever else. And the key is really our mental strength. You know, if you read stories, if you get a chance to read stories on people like Lance Armstrong, the cyclist who won the Tour de France, and he had all those tumours. And I think, you know, he was told at one point, I believe, according to the stories I've read, that he'd be lucky to be alive, let alone win again. But there must be something in his mind that thinks otherwise. And a classic example of belief is people using that belief to go forward. And the story I use in the course is about how belief about identity is powerful. If, for example, I know I'm conscious not everyone in the group follows sport and football, but I use various analogies and stories from various areas. Yet, this is one that we can all relate to a degree. If you were a chairman and you had to employ someone, okay, to come and work for you as a football manager, you owned a football club and you need to employ someone. If you got a list of CVs from people who want to be a manager in your club, and you've got to the last 2 or 3 CVs and thought, these look pretty interesting, and you pick up one CV and you look at the CV, you know, played for their country 50, 60 times, maybe more, won the European Football of the Year twice, 500 league games, finished second in the league with their team, and had an amazing pedigree. Okay, and then on the other hand, you get another CV, and this CV says, okay, didn't play at a high level, didn't even play professionally, or maybe played at a very moderate professional level, worked as an understudy to a manager at a club where his role was to be a translator, yet he sees himself as being good at what he does. And that's about pretty much what goes on his CV. Who do you take on board? If you're a chairman, who would you go for?
The one that believed it, he could do it.
Okay, so you'd go for the one that believes it, okay. Would anyone else take the person that...
I'd take the first person.
Yeah, okay.
Because they've played the game and they know
Okay.
they've got experience of it.
Okay, so you take the one with all that experience and, you know, the darling of English football who's won the European Cup. Well, if you took the first person, you would have taken Kevin Keegan. And a key thing about his belief was when England played against Germany in the World Cup qualifier in, I think it was before the 2002 World Cup, it may have been before the 2002 World Cup, I don't recall precisely when it was. Yeah, in an interview that I watched afterwards, when he was interviewed and they got beat in the last game at Wembley to Germany, he said along the lines that he didn't believe he was cut out for this level of football. And the belief held truth. He got beat. England were in disarray and they brought in a new manager and ended up qualifying. Yet, if you chose the second one, he's the guy that sat down in a press conference and called himself the special one, Jose Mourinho. And he's gone on to be one of the most, if not the most successful football manager of his generation. He'll probably go on to be one of the most successful of all time. And he's a guy that didn't play professional football at a very significant level, certainly anywhere near that Keegan did. Didn't have any experience. He worked as a translator and eventually a coach to the late Sir Bobby Robson. But it's that belief. He sees himself as a special one. And not only does it rub off on him, it rubs off on other people as well. And that's a key aspect really. And people can say what they want about Mourinho, but he's won a lot of things. And he didn't start at Real Madrid. There was a course to get there. And people talk about him having a little bit of luck along the way. Well, call it what you will, but I think everybody needs the odd break here and there. But it's not just the break that you get, it's how you respond to that. So the amazing thing is really, now he's working obviously as well for one of the biggest teams in the world, and the first is now really to be seen in that area. And belief has a massive impact, okay? Because no doubt there are people as knowledgeable as Mourinho, as knowledgeable as the best coach, as knowledgeable as the best person in the industry that you work in. No doubt you'll come across people in your own line of work who you probably think they haven't got as much knowledge as everybody else. They aren't necessarily more qualified. They don't necessarily have any more experience, yet they're very good at what they do to get results. and people scratch everything. How do they get results? A lot of it comes down to belief. Belief about themselves, okay, which is key. And the key is, years ago when I was doing some work and some coaching, someone said to me that they were struggling to find a partner, and they would walk through town and see people with partners and this, that and the other, and they said, you know, that they were relatively an attractive person, they had a good job, they couldn't seem to find a partner. And rather than focusing on themselves and finding their partner for themselves, they'd focus on other people who were other people. I'm as attractive as him, or you know, I've got a better job, I'm wealthy. Really, I said, well, when was the last time you asked someone to go out with you? Well, I shouldn't have to, they should come to me. Well, you're going to be waiting a long time. And that's the key, really, that's a belief.
Is that male or female?
Male. Well, there you go. And the key thing is, I guess the analogy of the story is that, okay, it's a belief. Okay, so the person, and my thoughts were, well, the person you see with someone probably asked that person at some point, or put themselves in a situation to do that. So you can see how powerful having a belief will be in terms of how we respond to situations behaviourally. We mentioned about modelling excellence, which is key. And the heart of NLP is about modelling success to replicate success. Now, I truly believe a lot of things are, well, most things are possible. I think if you really want something, you set your sights on it, you've got a good chance of getting there if you learn from the right people to achieve that. And if you think about the goal that you wrote down that you might have, it's worth thinking about people who have achieved what you would like to achieve and learning from them. In NLP, we've got a series of questions that we ask to identify the framework of their experience. Now, some people are fortunate to have been through subjective experience to get them to where they are. Not everyone has been equally as fortunate. That's not to say that they can't learn and get there in an accelerated time frame from learning from someone else. Because if you're going to run a marathon and you haven't done one before, would you ask someone who's run marathons or someone who's not done one before? You'd probably ask a marathon runner. You learn what they eat, how often they train, who they train with. You take all that on board, and it's a very powerful process. It's a very powerful process I've used for a lot of businesses when they're starting up, or even existing businesses who are remodeling themselves. I use it with a lot of athletes and sports people who've really done significantly well in a very short space of time. People then think, how do they get so far so fast? A lot of it is learning from people who are already there. We can take a massive accelerated learning process by doing that. That's not to say they don't have to work hard. You still got to work really hard to get there. And that's not to say that things come easy. You still have a rocky road at times getting there. Yet, if we can find templates of excellence, it's key. So what I would suggest to do in relation to your goal, if you were looking to write a book, then find someone who's written books, who can give you advice and knowledge. And you'll be surprised as to when you email someone or you phone someone, how forthcoming most people are. You know, people think that people are inaccessible. Most people are pretty accessible if you tell them nicely that you'd like to just learn a little bit. And I think you'll be surprised at people who are at the very highest level, just how humble they are about how they got to where they got to and how they are openly happy to share that knowledge. And modeling excellence is the key. And it's really a powerful process. And I think the key is you just never know when you sort of set the wheels in motion as to where you can be and what can be achieved. I think that if you, and you'll probably be aware of people yourself who you knew them at one point, yet 2-3 years later, you hear of them again, and they're off there very successful, whether it be business, sports, or life, or whatever really, and they just do it. They go about their business and they learn from other people. So people who succeed at generally model other people. It was interesting really, because on the course that I ran on the weekend, and when I did the modelling process at this point here, because we do that, we teach people how to model and everything else, what I found really interesting was one of the people in the group had never done modelling on a formal basis before, but when I asked her, this was in relation to running a marathon, when I asked her about how did she learn to do what she did, she told me that they had various people in her path to running that marathon to help her get towards where she got to. And the people she spoke to had run marathons. They could advise her on nutrition, they could advise her on aspects, visualization as well, and mental preparation. And at that point there, she realised that she did the actual process informally. Okay? And a lot of us model people informally, and more often than not, the stage of our life when we model people between 8 to 13, if we don't know otherwise, because in psychology, it's 8 to 13 where we go through the modelling phase. 0 to 7 tends to be the imprint phase. Whatever people say at that point there, we kind of take to heart, because in NLP our filters are raw. We can't really respond to things. We've got limited experience in life to process anything people say. So if people tell you you're great between 0 to 7, you'll probably believe that. If people tell you you're no good, you're hopeless, you're whatever else, you'll probably believe that too. And that's where a lot of people's issues stem with. And if you run with conventional psychology, then they tell you that the child is father to the man. Well, it's true if you believe that, but NLP is a little bit different. You can change that, you can break that cycle. 8 to 13 is generally the aspect where we model. And you've got children, you probably think sometimes, I've spoken to them exactly like my parents spoke to me. Or you'll do certain things and you'll think, damn, that's exactly what, a parent or an uncle, whoever else really. And I guess in some respects it can serve us, yeah. To get to where we want to get to, sometimes it may not serve us. So rather than running what we've got here in these 5 years, maybe adopting a process to model someone else to get us where we want to get to. Because it's a shame, because there's a lot of people who are very talented, very good at what they do, yet they stay there. And they stay in that thought process and they don't move forward. And they just live a lifetime basically, and live in a zone where they feel comfortable, where they've been told they belong. Okay, and that might work for some people, but for a lot of people out there, it doesn't work for them. It keeps them comfortable, but it stops them from getting to where they could potentially get to. And that's key, really. Modelling excellence is really key. And if you do nothing else, one of the most powerful things I do for a lot of people I work with, I always get them to read a book or watch a program or about someone similar to where they want to go and what they want to do. And it's normally a really powerful process. And amazing how far you can get in a very short space of time. And I was thinking, and I was speaking to someone today, in April I was doing some training in Australia, and I'm still involved in football. I still go out there and still have an input. And I was doing a camp, and on this camp I saw a young lad who was about 13. I said, he looks really, really talented. So I asked the coach, who I'd worked with closely over the last 4 or 5 years, to develop his academy. And I said to him, well, we've got to look at getting this guy across to the UK. He's really talented. And it's ironic, really, 4 or 5 years ago, he used to turn up at the park, this coach, and he'd get 2 or 3 people coming to his training sessions. And we sat down at the time. I said, okay, what's your vision? Where do you want to take what you do? And he said, well, I want to get to a point where I've got 300 or 400 kids training at the academy, and we've got people going across to European leagues to do well. And I said, okay, so we can get someone in 5 years into a team across to Europe, and you can get 200 people who are doing well. And I sat down talking to him Sunday night, and it was interesting really, because we sort of reflected on what we talked about years ago, and he says it's interesting how we've got to where we talked about he would get to 4 years ago. It was probably 1 year earlier than we sort of envisaged. But what was really more interesting, the lad that I mentioned earlier, the 13-year-old, he was actually a refugee from Sierra Leone. He was in Australia, and been a short space of time, and it was a point when he brought 4 or 5 lads over here. He's got them here at the moment. And at first, we knocked on a few doors, and people were reluctant to give him a go. So eventually 2 or 3 teams gave him a go. And the player that shone was the 13-year-old, and he's still shining now. And ironically enough, he's trialling, and he trialled for Manchester City, under 13. And they said, you're too good for the 13s, and they've promoted him to train for the 18s, which is a massive, if you compare a 13-year-old to an 18-year-old, it's a massive difference in age groups. But the amazing thing is, he was a lad, who was just a few months ago, and I think what was really powerful as well, Sarah actually told me that who works in broadcasting and had Tony on the show, he pointed towards NLP as being a powerful process he'd used with this young LSA to help him accelerate his ability. Now, I don't know if Sissy are going to take him on because of paperwork and bureaucracy and permutations, but the one thing they have said for sure, if it wasn't for paperwork and red tape, he'd be there now, really. So hopefully for his sake they sort something out. But the key thing is, and the moral of the story is really, is that how powerful a process NLP is. And as a coach, and as people, and as parents, as anything really, we can never underestimate the effect that we have on younger people with our own attitude, where it may not be cool at schools or at academies for the young people to show the respect they have for you, but you can rest assured in their own mind, they look up to us. They think we know all the answers to everything, really. And whatever we tell them, so that they see fit. And that's what's key, really, for us as a coach, to have that leadership quality, really. And the interesting thing is, as well, I mentioned that Sarah had Tony on the broadcasting, you talked about how you use these skills to transfer them, not just for the players, but for the whole business as well. So this unique set of transferable skills would take where he was to where he is. And the irony is, really, there's going to be people out there thinking, well, we did better as a player than he did, we did better as a coach, but he went for it. And credit to him, and that's the key. And that's how powerful NLP can be. The other area as well is being able to be in that zone. Okay, are you ever in that zone where you're just on fire? Everything that you do is just, you're in that zone of optimal performance. You're a musician, you can see you're nothing okay. So everything you do is just working, and there are times when you do something and it just doesn't seem to work. In NLP we have a process called developing an anchor, okay, which is a cue. Did anyone remember the rugby, Johnny Wilkinson, the goalkeeper used to hold his hands together before a goal kick? Okay. Oh, there we go. You brought the book in. There we go. So he used to clench his hands. There we go. Isn't that spooky, isn't it? Okay, so he used to clench his hands together. Okay, so what was he doing when he clenched his hands together? Probably praying as well. What he was doing is getting in that zone. And you'll see a lot of rugby kickers and sports people get in that zone. They'll do a cue. And the way they do that is they'll attach an emotional resource that's going to give them the best chance to succeed. Whether it's take the penalty, whether it's to kick a goal, they'll attach an emotional resource to what we call a cue. And the cue could be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic in Johnny Wilkinson's case. We can take one step further than that, and we can do that for any area of our life, whether it be presentation, whether it be interview, any area of our life really. And all we do to do that is, when you listen to a song and it kind of takes you back to a certain time in your life, or music, we can use our memory and our mind to take us back to a point where we felt those resources, and we can attach it to a cue. They did an experiment years ago, the Pavlov dog experiment. You may or may not have heard of that. What they would do, they'd put some food out and ring a bell, and the dog would come out, eat its food, and go away. And then eventually they wouldn't put no food, they'd just ring the bell, the dog would come out to eat. It had an association, the bell ringing and food. And we can fabricate our own anchor and our own cue, which is a really powerful process. One of the things to do that is to actually associate to that experience, or that mindset we want to be in, and we can attach it to a cue. So what we would do, let's say for example your cue was thumb and finger, what you would do is you'd go back in your mind to a time when you felt the resource you want. There's confidence, motivation, focus, and then what you would do, you'd fully experience those feelings. And having fully experienced those feelings, when you connect to those feelings, you'd press your anchor and you'd hold it until the experiences intensify, and then you would release. And eventually what would happen, you'd build an association, the thumb and finger, and that thought process. So then you could pretty much fabricate those feelings every time you want. Okay, so if you're going in to do a presentation, you could press your anchor. If you're doing it in an interview, you could press your anchor. If you're in sport, you could do that at any point. And I used to do this a lot with sports people, particularly football people, in the off season between May and June, helping them develop their own anchors, their own cues to get in the zone. And at a time when they used to have the wristbands, I'd get them to use to flick the wristband to stop their thought process and think of a more productive thought process. But what I'll do is, normally what you would do, you do this with an individual, but what I will do, for time, I'll work with as a group, and you can give it a goal. So if you think of a resource that would be useful for you, for an event that you might have coming up, if you haven't got an event, just in general, a state of mind that's useful for you, and I'm going to guide you through doing an anchor, and to recall the time, decide on a cue that would work for you. One that's discreet enough for you to press, like a light switch. So if you run with thumb and finger, it's up to you what you want to run with, but I'll take you through the actual process. The process involves closing your eyes, and the reason you close your eyes is to block out your conscious thought process, and unconsciously, where we store our memories is where the emotion is at its most intensive, and then we can recall these emotions and resources, and the two will start stacking up. So just relax and close your eyes and think of a time when you were extremely confident, doing really, really well. Okay? And just think of a time, really relax, and think of a time when you were really doing well and in that zone. Okay? And once you think of that time, notice what you see, hear, and feel. Where you are, what's going on, any colours that you're wearing, or any colours of the people around you. And once you connect to the experience, just press your anchor and hold, and let the experience intensify. On a scale of 1 to 10, when you get to 9, then you can release your anchor. So you're holding your anchor from the moment that you connect to the experience for about 5 seconds, and release when you're at 9. And when you are at 9, you can release and just gradually come back in the here and now. Okay. Okay. Okay, and what you would do is repeat that process 2, 3, 4 times, and the more you stack the anchor, the more powerful it becomes, which is key. It's a very powerful process, and you'll probably find if you press one finger together, or whichever you use as your cue, you'll start building a neurological link pretty much straight away. It doesn't take a long time. It only takes one song that you hear when you have an experience to get you back in that mindset. The same applies with emotion. If the emotion is relived and powerful enough, then it will attach, and it's a good opportunity to be able to access those resources, which is key. And one of the first times I started using the NLP in business, ironically enough, I was doing a seminar in sport, and I was talking to young guys who were all sports orientated, and in the group, one of the performers' parents came along, and this is going back a very long while ago. He came in and says, well, could you not do that stuff in business? And I'd like to think that, you know, taking some of these things in business, I may have pioneered certain things, but I thought, well, how could you do that? And we sat down together and we thought about ways that we can integrate these strategies into business. And it was amazing how things would really kick on. And some of the things that we would do is sales team, get them in team huddle, like you see certain teams do at times, and when they're in that huddle, they're focusing on their best performances, give them their own cues, give them their own templates of performance excellence that they go back to when things aren't going as well as they want them to go. And we all go through situations where we're doing something and it doesn't always go to plan, and we've got to switch back on again. And the danger is, when it doesn't go to plan, something negative happens, is that we just focus too much on negative. We need to break that state. And a lot of top performers, top coaches will talk about mental state being key. If anyone's ever heard Tony Robbins, a motivational speaker, he'll talk a lot about mental state being key. Being in the right state at the right time is key. And the anchoring process is a really powerful process to use and worth exploring in more depth. The other thing as well, I think whatever we do, one of the key ingredients for success is having humour. I think sometimes we can take life too serious. I think, you know, we're here once, we're here for a short time in the grand scheme of things, really. And you get up in the morning, you've got a fresh start, a new day. Who knows what opportunity might present itself? I think humour's a big thing, and particularly in some of the areas I work with, offenders, it can be very deep. Certain things happen, and you come across people who do, bad things, and also, as well as do bad things to other people, do bad things to themselves, and they're self-harming and substance misuse and all these things. I guess at some point, humour just kind of is a great leveller, and if we can use humour to interact with people as well, it's such a powerful process. And some of these I tell people is, one of the key things is to just, go back and just remind yourself why you do what you do, and sometimes seeing the funny side of things. If we mess up, if something doesn't go to plan, sometimes it's always, useful at a certain point, looking back and just seeing the funny side of things, because really nothing has any meaning other than the meaning we put on the situation, really. And when we think about things, and what I often tell people when I'm coaching, when we think, okay, if you were entering the, the end part of your life, how would you perceive certain things that have happened? And I realise then that really a lot of things that we worry about and get concerned about and stress people out in the